MMA, but any particular interviews or experiences stand out?
You know, nothing really. The Chael Sonnen interview after he fought Anderson Silva at UFC 117 always stands out as one of my favorite interviews because, back then, now Chael has this cycle where he'll hype a fight, he'll go out and he'll fight his ass off, and then after he loses, he's very contrite. Hey, I did my best, did the best I could. But back then at UFC 117, we really didn't get that. We didn't know that was his MO. But when I interviewed him the day after he fought Anderson Silva, it was one of the most raw. The guy cried in my interview, and it was raw, and it was just extremely touching and powerful to see a guy who thought he had it, man. For 4.5 rounds, he thought he had it, and he couldn't believe that he was actually going to be a world champion. And, in the last minute of the fight, he loses to a triangle choke, which he's been caught in before. So imagine his disappointment. I honestly thought the next day that he wasn't going to show up for the interview because I couldn't imagine if I were in his shoes, I'd be like, the last thing I want to do right now is do a freaking interview with Mike Straka. So when I was waiting for him in the lobby and he said, I'll be there at 9 a.m. And sure enough, that elevator door opened at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning after UFC 117. And Chael Sonnen with 2 black eyes and stitches and bloody knees and stabbed up feet came out and he said, all right, Mike, I'm ready. And I was shocked and I was touched and I was like, I said, man, I can't even believe you showed up because I told you I would. And I just think that's a man of his word, man.
Mm-hmm. Word. Hey, Mike, I have a non-softball question for you. I'm going to try one here. I have a crazy conspiracy theory that all major sports are susceptible to corruption, and that there have been more than a few rigged fights and works in MMA. Now, do you think fixed fights were left behind in the Japan Pride days, or do you think it's possible that some of that still goes on today, even in organizations as big as the UFC?
I don't think there are any work fights in UFC, but I do think one can arrange a fight where the winner is predictable. I think when you're matchmaking, you can say, all right, we know Chael is going to win this fight. For instance, when Little Nas fights Rashad, if it's pride, okay, you want Rashad to win that fight because then you want Rashad to drop down and fight Anderson Silva. You want that fight if you're UFC. You absolutely want it. So, okay, I'm Joe Silva. I need Rashad to win a fight so then we can say he's going to get an immediate title shot at 85. And so you put him up against Little Nas because you think, all right, Little Nas a name, but Rashad's going to kill him. So it's not so much that they're fiction fights, but I think that they're matchmaking fights in order to have the outcome that would create a money-making card, which would be Rashad Evans versus Anderson Silva. Well, what happens? Little Nog wins the fight. You can't predict that. And let me tell you something. If it was fixed, bro, there's no way in hell Little Nog wins that fight. No way in hell. So I don't believe that there are fixed fights in UFC. I really don't. And I'm not saying that to protect my credentials. I'm not saying that because I'm afraid of Dana White. I'm saying that because that's what I honestly believe. I don't think it is. I really don't.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
think about that logic. That was going to be the next title fight at 85. Rashad Evans versus Anderson Silva. That's why they never committed to Weidman.
Yeah, that's true.
And it didn't work out that way. So if it was fixed, man, why wouldn't you fix that fight? The Nogueiras fought in Pride, so I'm sure if that was the actual, if it was really if they're going to go down that road, they're going to go to the guys who've done it before.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that.
No, I hear you. But okay, let's say it is just limited to, the matchmaking is set up in a way so that the big money fights happen. Do you think, if that is the case, and I'm not saying it is, but if that is the case, that, that sort of matchmaking goes on purpose, do you think at that point, is it still a sport or is it just more entertainment? You know what I mean?
Well,
is it still a sport?
There's always going to be the entertainment factor because it is entertainment. When Chael Sonnen can get 3 title shots in a row, or not in a row, but 3 title shots, it's entertainment. Did he deserve an immediate shot at John Jones? Of course not. Even Chael Sonnen wouldn't argue with that. So there is entertainment, but that's what this sport is. Boxing's the same way. Just because Mayweather has the ability to pick and choose his own opponents. Does that make it entertainment, or does it make it a sport? It's a very fine line when it comes to combat sports. It's not like wrestling. But think about, why isn't amateur and folk wrestling and Olympic wrestling, why isn't it a more popular sport? Because there is no entertainment value. It's strictly the winner moves on. And when you look at the national championships in NCAA wrestling, oftentimes they're riding time victories, and those are the most boring matches ever. But what's a good match? And what's a really good match? When that national champion wrestles an up-and-coming kid who might be, 13 and 9 in his career, and he's going out there to win, man. He's going to go out there and he's got nothing to lose, and that's when you see the national champion. That's when you know how good he really is, because he gets to beat the crap out of this guy, and people are like, wow, dude, that guy is amazing. Did you see what he did to that kid? But when you put the same guy up against the guy who's 122 and 1, and he's 122 and 123 and 0, it's a close match, and it's not entertaining at all. See, you have to have those matches where it's going to be an exciting fight. You have to.
Yep. No, I agree. I mean, Chael Sonnen being my favorite fighter is all you need to know, basically. But okay. So getting back to just that last question about the rigged fights, I had to word it carefully because I know you've got to work close to people in the UFC and the MMA business in general. You said you don't really give a damn, but I'm just wondering, you as a journalist and interviewer, do you pretty much have to hold back and only lob the softball questions at the people you're interviewing? Like, do you have to ask ahead of time if there's anything that they need to that you absolutely can't ask, or how does it really work with specifically UFC fighters? Do you ask them is there anything you don't want to touch, or do you just plow right ahead wherever you want to go?
It depends on who the person is. I mean, I've come straight out. Like when I interviewed Dana White, after they bought Strikeforce, I said, anything you don't want to talk about it? And Dana always says, man, Mike, I'm not afraid to talk about anything. So I've never had a problem with Dana. But I do ask. I always say, is there anything you don't want me to go near? Like, for instance, Dan Cormier had lost a child in a car accident, Ronda Rousey's father killed himself when he was, I don't see sometimes how that's going to help my interview with that person. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's hurt my career. Maybe I'm not as famous as I could be or as successful as I could be because I'm not going for that sensational interview. I'm not going for that sensational thing. I never once asked Ronda Rousey about her father. And I've interviewed Ronda Rousey, and I was one of the first people to interview Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
And I never once asked her. And I knew about it because I did my research, but I never once asked her. When I interviewed Dan Cormier when he was in the 2008 Olympics, I didn't ask him about his son who died in a car accident. And that was something, by the way, that was pitched to me when they pitched a story to me, his PR people. Said, and he's got a great story, he's coming off this horrible tragedy. And I didn't ask him about it. And in fact, when I walked him to the elevator, he thanked me for not asking him about it. And I just, there's some things that I don't, as a journalist, I think about, what do I need? What do I need to get my story out? It's not like I'm on 60 Minutes. That's different. When Rhonda did it for the HBO show or the Fox Countdown show or the primetime show, that's much different. If I was a producer of that show, I would have asked her because it's a much bigger platform. And that story needs to be told on that platform. But when I'm on Fox Fight Game, which was an internet show, or Fighting Words, which is a HDNet show that 10,000 people watch, it doesn't serve me to ask that. And then when we did the Spike show, which I would have asked that on a bigger platform, but that wasn't what the story was about. The story was about fighting Misha Tate. And, that's why when I interviewed Misha and Ronda, and I also want to be fair. So for instance, if I ask Ronda Rousey personal questions, I need to ask Misha personal questions because now I'm not giving a fair account of both fighters. So I have to be very fair if I'm interviewing two fighters and I'm telling a story about their fight. If I'm going to give Ronda a personal story and not Misha, well, that's not fair to Misha. So I try to keep it extremely fair and just, I like to be Switzerland. The fans hate me and certainly the bloggers fucking hate me, but the fighters can always say, there's not one fighter out there who says I've been unfair to them. Not one. And that's why I always get the interview. That's why I always get a call back. The if I'm writing a story, or if I call up and say I'm down here with a camera crew, or if I show up with my camera, I have never once heard anybody say, no, I don't want to work. I don't want to do an interview with Mike. Never once.
That's great. No, that's awesome. And yeah, just before I give it back to Jake he has just a couple final questions. I just want to say that yes, that is exactly why I think you are one of the good guys, one of the good journalists out there. You can get a good interview out of someone without bringing an agenda into it, which is it seems like it's difficult to do now. That's all I see, in journalism these days. So, hats off to you, Mike Straka.
Let me tell you what the secret is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't prepare questions. I read my research. I know about my people that I'm going to interview, but I don't ever write questions. And, I find this difficult when I'm producing this Fuse News TV show. But these kids my hosts want questions. Like, can you prepare some questions for me? And I'm like, wait, prepare questions for you? Are you kidding me? But I do it, and then they say, well, I don't understand this question. And then I'm like, why are you hosting a show, bro? It just boggles my mind. But I don't go in with questions. I go in with a general, idea of where this is going to go, but sometimes people take me in a completely different direction, and it becomes something that, for instance, I wasn't going to ask Ken Shamrock about steroids. Mm-hmm. That wasn't my intention. It wasn't on my agenda. And then, the producer on my Fighting Works show, the interview was over. I mean, it was over. I'm taking off my mic, and the Fighting Works producer goes, hey, Ken, did you want to talk about steroids at all? Because we didn't touch on that at all. I guess he looked down at his notepad and think he wanted to touch on it as the producer. And Ken goes, oh, I'll talk about steroids, sure. And to the producer's credit, when I sat down and I sat back down and asked the question, it became the story. It got picked up everywhere. Ken Shamrock admits to taking steroids on Mike Straka's show, but that wasn't my intention. And I didn't even want to go there because, frankly, he was retired. His career was over anyway. Nobody cares. Anymore if Ken Shamrock did steroids. But it got picked up, and the producer was happy that that's how the story worked out. But I wasn't going in there with that agenda at all.
Yeah, that's what I appreciate, though. Definitely keep it up, man. Thanks for the tips. I am taking notes.